Thank you very much, Mal. You've said everything I was going to say, so Scott, I'll call on you. It's a real treat to be here. I'll repeat myself and repeat Mal a little bit, and y'all just don't remind me. I'm old, I'm senile, Scott can't hear. I was in the computer business starting in 1969, and the first computers we based our company on were Apple II computers. This is the predecessor of the Apple II computer. This is the Anniston Rotary Directory. And this is a real treat to read. It's where you find out all the stuff you forgot about and you know, remember that. So if anybody wants to look at the Rotary Directory, I think this will be an opportunity to do it. I think Mal said I joined in 1967. You may be right. Maybe it was 68, 69. 67. I will, if it's written, I'll take it. And as he mentioned, my grandfather was a member, my father was a member, and that was the only reason I was a member. And the reason I went into the venture capital business was because in those days, as Mal said, they had the categories that you had to join, and there were so many insurance people in the business. I said, I better get in a different profession or I'll never get in the Rotary Club. Gibson, I think, is the first third-generation president. His grandfather was president, his father was president, and he was president. So that's an unusual sequence of events that we're fortunate to have. I got in the club in 1967. I got kicked out of the club in 1968 by Jimmy Potter, who was the president. Back then, the attendance requirements were a little more strict than they are today, and I've forgotten exactly what it was, but if you missed 2 meetings in a row or 3 meetings in a quarter or something, I don't know, you were out of the club. There was no, why don't you try to come? It was just, you're out of here. So Brandy Ayers and I got kicked out of the club on the same day by Jimmy Potter. And Brandy said, well, to hell with that, I'm out of here. And Brandy, to my knowledge, has never been back except maybe one time as a speaker. I think he made Bob Davis do this. I'm not sure about that, but we're glad to have the Star still represented. Also, under the attendance requirements, we had very few doctors because typically they had to work for some reason. I've never understood what doctors do, but anyway, apparently they have to work. So generally we could get the radiologist because they could just kind of do what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it, and they'd call you up and say it's broken or it's not broken, and that. So the radiologists tended to be more dominant in this club than
the others had to go to a meeting at the bank.
That's right. Jay was talking about his father making up. That was back in the day when I was a little bit obsessive compulsive about it. I was had my wife and 18-month-old son, and we were going down to Florida, and I was going to miss the Anniston Rotary Club meeting, so we were down in South Georgia, and I made Susan stop at some little town down there that I've never heard of. And I said, I'm going to the Rotary Club. You and Prance sit out here in the park, and y'all just play and enjoy yourself. And she told me after that meeting that you're never making up another meeting when you've got me and Prance as your guest, because I'm not sitting out in that park for 2 hours while you go in there and raise King. The speaker that day was Bo Calloway. Most of you are not old enough to remember who Bo Calloway was, but he was a congressman from Georgia, and his family started Callaway Gardens. I did a makeup in Tokyo, Japan one time, 1985, and I had to pay $125 for my meal. I put an inflation calculator on that, and that today would be $480 per meal every week. So I recommend if you go to Tokyo, take a bag lunch and don't eat the meal. Although they did serve whiskey, sake, and stuff. It was a pretty good meal. The Paul Harris Fellow, I believe, started in 1947. I'm not sure about that, but I think so. And the Paul Harris Fellow is the best bargain you can have today because it costs $1,000. It cost $1,000 in 1947 also. Adjusted for inflation, that's $10,650 today. So those of you who complain about $25 a year to become Paul Harris, participating members, let me tell you, it was a lot more expensive back in the day. And Anniston Rotary Club had quite a number of Paul Harris Fellows in the 40s, so they were truly dedicated to what they were doing. Different Rotary clubs, you visit different Rotary clubs, you find they have a little different way of doing things. For example, the Peachtree City Rotary Club in Peachtree City, Georgia, doesn't do the four-way test. They have the two-way test. And the two-way test is it fun, and can you get away with it? And then they dismiss the meeting. So maybe we ought to reconsider that, Tommy.
I'll take that under advisement.
Thank you. Now, we're a product, as Mal alluded to, of our environment here in the South. And we were predominantly white, predominantly male. And I think I'm right about this. The first black member we had was Cleo Thomas. Cleo was a great guy, but we couldn't keep him interested forever. I don't know, he's still around here. He just won't come to Rotary. But his wife was one of the very first female members, and she is still here. I don't guess she's here today, but she is absolutely great. So we're fortunate to have Carla as a member of the club since about 98, 99, something like that. We also had deaf members, right, Scott? We had handicapped members. I'm the token amputee in this club. To my knowledge, we've never had another one, and I think I feel discriminated against, but I'm glad to be here. We did have a blind member named Calvin Wooten. I'll finish up with him in just a second. When women started coming in the club, we had a whole different set of issues. Gary Schoenberg had one of the problems that was nobody, I think, ever anticipated. We had a new member inducted, and it was tradition that the president would take the pin and pin it on the lapel of the new member, and this member was well endowed and had a very tight sweater on, and Gary was standing here with his pin and looking at it. Couldn't figure out what to do with the pin, so finally handed it to her and said, "Here, put this on." We meet, Mal is right, we met at the first Rotary meeting I ever remember going to was upstairs at the old YMCA, which is on Wilmer. It's now a parking lot by the side of Couches. It was a two-story building there that was originally the YMCA. From there, then we went to the current YMCA building on 14th Street. I had forgotten about the Methodist Church. I guess we did that. Short time. Presbyterian Church. We did, was it the Lions Club? Elks Club, South. Boy, we had, the place smelled like smoke and whiskey. We'd go in there on Tuesday, and you couldn't tell whether you were down there to have a party or attend a Rotary meeting. But anyway, you were there. And then we went to the Downtowner Motel. For those of you who are not old enough to remember the Downtowner, we've got, it's next to the classic Cadillac place. It's now a vacant lot. And so the last thing I will tell you, two things, and I promise I'll turn it over to you. One is we used to have meetings in sort of different locations. We went to the Anniston Ordnance Depot, and Susan and I got to fly in a helicopter, first and only time I've ever been in a helicopter. And then we got in some sort of all-terrain vehicle troop carrier or something, and we would ride up and down the hills, and it was a great experience for us. Finally, our blind member that I will mention was a guy named Calvin Wooten. He owned a piano company here, and he was at Rotary. You could just count him being here. And he and I had some of the same issues. I could drive better than he could, but he could walk better than I can. And I used to sit with Calvin because it made me feel better about my handicap. This guy's worse in shape than I am. And so one day he turned to me and he says, would you please point me toward the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance? He said, I've been pledging allegiance to the kitchen door for the last 3 weeks, and nobody told me that. And we had one speaker who stood up here. She was introducing her speaker, and she said, it's important when you're making a speech to not say anything that you can't get on a 3x5 card. And then she talks, and she talks, and she talks. Calvin turned to me and said, is that card 3x5 feet? Scott Andrews, it's all yours.